Hi, you're listening to Collectively Speaking by the Birthday Collective, a bottom-up initiative to develop ideas about Singapore's future. Welcome to this space, where Birthday Book alumni have conversations about the things that matter to them, to us, and to Singapore. We hope that you will be a part of the many conversations we will have, or perhaps to even start your own. And now, onward with the episode.
Welcome to Collectively Speaking. I'm Joshua Chambers, your host for today. I'm joined by an illustrious group of techies, and they're just going to introduce themselves now.
Hi, I'm May-Ann. I'm the Managing Director of TRPC, a tech policy and regulatory consulting company. Simultaneously, I'm also the Executive Director of the Asia Cloud Computing Association and an adjunct lecturer at the Communications and New Media Department of the National University of Singapore. I do have an essay, My Father's Daughter, which is coming out in the 2021 edition of the Birthday Book.
My name is James Chan. I'm the co-founder and CEO of ION Mobility, designing and producing smart and connected electric motorcycles for the Southeast Asian markets of Indonesia and Vietnam. I'm also a father of 3. My essay is titled Pulling the Virtual World to Singapore, published in the inaugural 2016 edition.
My name is Wun Hsiung, and my work is in the area of identity. While I'm a proponent of all things digital, it's clear that we still operate in a largely analog space, and we have yet to reap the benefits of a fully digitalized identity ecosystem, which I have explored to some extent in my 2020 essay, The Identity of Identity.
And mine's called Serendipity, The Secret to Success, and it was published in 2018. Today, this tech podcast is fundamentally talking about identity, who we are as residents of Singapore in a changing world, in a digitizing world, and in a world where it seems that we can be whatever we say we want to be to different groups of people. Wun, you write about identity in the digital world. How many identities can we have? Can we be whoever we want to be to whichever group we want to be that to?
We've come a long way since the first modern travel document was officially created by King Henry V in 1414. Sort of interesting factoid there, right? But isn't it amazing that with the online world, our time is now spent traversing between physical and the virtual? And especially with the post-COVID reality, we might even see our time in the virtual increase by several orders of magnitude. So digital identity bridges these two worlds and allows our current systems of governance, commerce, banking, etc. to coexist. So we aren't just an identity card or a passport anymore, right? We're an organic collection of identities, constantly growing with every online platform that we subscribe to. So we probably have too many online credentials and possibly use the same password for most of them, which is a big security no-no, by the way. So there's a well-known saying, on the internet, nobody knows if you're a dog. Behind the veil of anonymity provided by alias and throwaway email addresses, one can disappear and transform into a completely separate entity with a separate social media history and career profile. So essentially, 6-foot-tall Samantha from Tinder could end up being 5'3" Charlie from Tiong Bahru. So the sky's the limit, really. All the more reason for physical and digital identities to converge and simplify to a common denominator or be interoperable, sharing different facets of our collective online profile to combat fraud, identity theft, and other forms of nefarious online activities.
James, how many online identities do you have? Do you have different avatars out there in the world? Are you different person to different people, different groups?
It depends on what time of the day you're asking, right? And which years you're referencing to when we were younger and we had more experimentation of online identities. But certainly, I think on the same note of what Wun said, and on my point, I think we have one unique DNA, right, in this analog world, and we have a multiverse of digital identities that we maintain, some more than others, and I think it's easier as an analog being to have less than more, But as someone who's born in 81, I think maybe someone who's born post 2000 would disagree, right? Like I think I need to have less. The younger generation might think they need to have more. So each to their own in this online democratic world that we find ourselves in, and I think that's fair game.
When I was doing online dating, my my online persona was someone, a fun guy. I was skiing, I was doing adventurous stuff. There weren't any pictures of me lazing around on the sofa on a Sunday afternoon eating a bag of Doritos, I'll tell you that. But that is a part of who I am. James, I want to talk a bit about your essay as well, because you say, I like this quote in it, you say, there is no reason why governments cannot compete with tech giants for the trust of their populace. What does it mean that they're competing for that trust first? And what does that mean for who we are as citizens? Are we essentially digital consumers of the state as well as digital consumers of Apple Music?
I think it's a very heavy question, led on by a very heavy article. And I think I'll try and answer that. So insofar as citizens are to governments what consumers are to tech giants and their online services, the answer to the second part of the question, does that make citizens consumers? There'll be a categorical yes, right? But the longer explanation I would give would be, citizens are consumers of government services, citizens themselves are also creators of data when they engage and transact with governments. And just like how tech giants had to create appealing and often addictive interfaces and functionality to appeal to consumers, to give them their services screen time, and implicitly the data and metadata, the raw data you get in the metadata, I see no reason why governments shouldn't take a more data-centric approach towards how they design their interactions through the various interfaces with their citizens, right? And that's what I meant when I said you have to compete with the tech giants for the trust of the populace. Today, we're not doing enough of it. We're just saying, hey, I'm doing a eGov service. Transact with me, please, right? And, you could just find it there and use it. But the reality of the situation is that you have to employ the multitude of disciplines now to contest with these online giants for the trust of of their time, their data, and far poorer will we be if the governments do not know how to do that in this highly competitive digital and technological world.
And you also say in your essay about a new national operating system that government should be building powered by digital identity. What would this look like? What do you mean by that?
So in computing law, an operating system is a system software that manages the hardware, the software resources, and provides common services for computer programs. In my time, in our era of computers and OSs, we had a less technologically able, more constrained interpretation of user interfaces, right? Where users interact with the computer system through command lines. And in today's day and age, you have across mobile, desktop, or lap-bound devices, they have way fancier UI that still have command lines, but most people don't have to access, right, to use. The starting point, back to that earlier thread about identity as well, is of any meaningful analog sentient world is unique identity. Right, and I don't see why the same assumption should not extend to the digital online world. Even if rendered video deepfakes and artificial intelligence like GPT-3 can produce artificial but extremely lifelike personas, I postulate that future unique AI should be accorded unique identities to avoid the messiness that can ensue. Right, just think of the mashup between the movies Her, Matrix, and Terminator. Right, there'll be too many copies of Her talking to each of us. There'll be one ultimate copy trying to control us. Right? So it's messy. We should identify them. We should identify each other. Right? And what I've yet to see, actually, that I would love to, that I think our society is ready for, is an open platform for end-to-end national policy, from inception to formulation, experimentation to refinement, and ultimately feedback post-implementation.
And let's bring in May-Ann here, 'cause of course, lecturing at National University of Singapore, along with the many other things that you're doing. What kind of tech could be powering this national operating system?
It's interesting because Wun actually started with a lot of the bits and pieces asking about identity and the different pieces of identity that you would bring together as yourself. We talked a little bit about the personalities that we have on different platforms. Samantha from Tinder versus who was it from Tiong Bahru?
Charlie.
Charlie from Tiong Bahru, and I was gonna ask James, is one of your identities Samantha from Michigan or whatever it was. There are different parts of the picture that we're dealing with, and I think that for identity, the first thing that I would like to contribute is this concept of change. I think that there have been studies from the Pew Research Center in the USA that state that children, when you actually do a longitudinal study of how they use social media and how they use different types of technology, their attitudes towards privacy and identity actually change over the years. At first, they'll be very happy, at least in the beginning, this is about maybe 10 years ago, people were actually quite happy to swap out their personal information for the service. And then they got a little bit more conservative as they grew older, and then when they had children. So this is a longitudinal study. So this idea of identity shifting and the ability to change your identity as will when you are younger, I think it's an important part of identity forming. So should we allow for that mix-up to happen? I think that we should be allowing for that to happen. Now, that's the complete antithesis of a national operating system where we have one identity, whether it's a proper identity card system or a pseudonymization system where you say, Lim May-Ann, this is my IC number, and this is my pseudonymized number, and this is my T token, and then this is how I identify myself to all of Singapore. I mean, that's one aspect of it, but we also have to look at that malleable aspect of it. Coming to James's point about the national operating system and the comparison between an e-government system and the private sector, I think trust is a very complicated approach, very, very complicated, very multi-layered topic that needs to be unpeeled, because equating government trust versus trust of private sector, I would say that as a Singaporean, I trust my government more than I trust the private sector. However, do I trust that the private sector has a better understanding and better understanding in systems for security that protects my data? I would say, actually, I trust the private sector a little bit more. So you got to unpeel that layer before you talk about, okay, can we equate government trust with private sector trust? It's a little bit different there. So when you talk about identity and protecting the identity system, I think that the operating system of the government is a really good idea. That's really core. I like where indeed the pieces of the Singapore operating system have been put in place already. I think that we're on the way. I think that we're asking the right questions. I don't think that every other government in the world is going to enjoy this sort of privileged, trusted position that our Singapore government has, I guess, amassed for itself prior to this technological world. But here's where I come in terms of my questioning about identity and digitalization. What about the people who are left behind? I'm happy to promote the future. And I think that it's massively important for us to be entering into that space where we prepare our children and our children's children for the next lap of development in the digital world. But what happens when you have an auntie who has a 2G phone? Okay, understandably, 2G has been switched off, but what if she's not very understanding of how to use the smartphone that she has now gotten possession of? She's only going to be using it for calling people. That's no better than a 2G phone. What happens when people don't understand the difference between switching on the Wi-Fi and mobile data, which, by the way, is my mom. She switches on both her Wi-Fi and mobile data at the same time because she doesn't understand the difference. How does that play into that particular community, which is increasingly being left behind as we move further and further ahead and accelerate, by the way, into the future? That's one of the questions which I'm interested in and talk about when I'm doing my volunteer work with Engineering Good, for example.
And let's talk about that in a second. So you put some challenges to James. James, would you like to respond to those first? And then...
Sure. I totally agree with the need for youths to experiment with identities. the trouble with government perspectives, or at least even from an enterprise perspective, is to know your customer, right? Which means who is the person. And so while that's why you have you have a multitude of identity personas that you can maintain off an identity, and you allow that, but you ultimately need to link it back to one person, right? I think that's obvious. The digital divide problem, and I can definitely see that. I think the same's happening around the world, right? More than 1 billion children have been left at home, disconnected from classrooms, and being subjected to varying levels of ongoing education in this HBL world, right? Where we are WFH, right? And the challenge here is to be careful about overly touting what I call digital welfare, when where the intrinsic nature of digital is so ingrained in just pulling ahead, right? Because it's like a new toy where only the certain types of kids know how to use it, and we definitely need to teach the rest of the population how to benefit from it. But where does the line stop? Right? Do we go as far as saying, let's take away all the mundane jobs from our NS men, let's create a platform for the underprivileged 20% of the population, and let's pay them a salary online to learn how to earn online income doing those digitized work? So where is that line? Like, do we go down to that level to help them? So I'm definitely all for providing universal access. In fact, I believe that we should not talk about universal basic income, right? I believe that we should talk a lot more about universal computing access, right? In order to be able to educate the forgotten, the left behind. But we need to temper the line between the cost and the benefits of, like we all want society to get ahead. We want the left behind society segments to stay on pace. But the main thing is to give them the trampoline to bounce, right? The next generation, the trampoline to bounce on to generate further opportunities for themselves. It's generating flow, developing the good filters, and then knowing how to take action. I think that's key in any world, and having these frameworks would help anyone thrive in a non-digital or digital environment. Yeah.
And let's go back to May-Ann on that, because this is one of your areas of expertise, is this digital inclusion area, as you might call it. How do you have that conversation with people who don't really want to be online very much?
Well, it's the development of policies that have to understand that nuance. So I am happy to hear that James is quite happy to make sure that it's inclusive. But one of the things which I realized very quickly as I do my volunteer work and have rigorous conversations with people is that there will be people who cannot be helped. It is literally, there is a line there. So I'm not even talking about a trampoline, because these are 90-year-old people who should not be on trampolines at all. And it is really tricky. And I think that that's something which is going to be a policy question for the next generation of policymakers, because we have to ask these questions. And then the question therefore becomes a judgment call. Where do you indeed draw that line between development and progress and prosperity for the nation, Majulah Singapura,
and as much equality as possible, right?
As much equality as possible, while yet still making sure that you take care of the less privileged, you take care of that bottom of the pyramid. And that's a question of balance. And I think that this is a core portion of where a lot of the volunteers' hearts are, because you do have to, number one, ask that question, listen with compassion, and then not force policies down people's throat, because you can have as many skills future programs as you want to learn about, one's new security features that he's been rolling out, and AR and VR. But if the person doesn't want to do it, then the old adage stands, right? You can bring a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink. But we do have to ask these questions. We do have to bring the horse to water. And I think that that's a balance that it needs to be struck when it comes to new policies that we develop for the e-government operating system for the future. And I think that Singapore is doing really well in asking these questions, but we're struggling to come up with the answers because we're always on the go. We're saying new, better, faster. And it's not wrong, because we do see the new world that's coming up. We do see, oh my gosh, my children, are we going to get to that next stage? Oh my gosh, what about me and my next stage? What skills do I need to go to upskill on? But at the same time, you're like, oh my gosh, there are also people who have difficulty just keeping up with right now what's going to happen to them. We need to ask these questions. We need to create a safe space to ask these questions, and then hopefully not be too judgmental or condemning of some of the initial answers that come up first. I think that we need to have these safe policy discussion places for us.
I mean, pre-COVID-19, there was that big debate around screen time. Are we spending too much time on screens? Obviously, nobody seems to care about that now. I'll stare at a screen all day and all night, please. But is it a legitimate choice in the modern world to say, you know what, I don't want to engage with any of this stuff. I don't want to be in the digital world at all. This isn't me. I just want to live my life without having to engage. Is that a legitimate choice, one? And can you actually do it anymore? Who wants to go first? May-Ann?
I don't know. I think that it is indeed a choice, but I think that people have varying degrees of choices, isn't it? You have people who cannot get onto the digital world. That's one. Then you have people who have not activated the digital world. For example, if you have a Sing pass and it's emailed to you and the pass is mailed to you, but you've not activated it, for example. But whether or not you can actually get off the bandwagon if you have a choice, I do know some people who have deleted their Facebook accounts, for example. I do know people who have said, I'm taking a social media break and I'm going to get off completely. Now, what exactly, when we say screen time, what exactly does switch off mean? Because like it or not, when you're a government, you do have to have the means to govern. And one of the more important bits and pieces is knowing who you're governing in the first instance. So coming back again to identity, at least a digital identity exists, a social security number, for example. But you could, of course, opt to go off the grid. Is it going to be difficult for you? I think it is, because you're going to have problems paying people, paying yourself, getting money, etc. It is going to be increasingly extremely painful not to be on digitally.
I mean, I'm certainly thinking, if I was 80 years old, I think, you know what, I've lived my life, I've contributed to building this nation. Stop forcing me to do new things. The last thing I want to do is go online on the... Stop forcing me, let me live my life.
So then what happens is the child of the 80-year-old dude would simply be doing it for the father or the mother. And as long as it is a legal requirement by the government, right, for that to be transacted electronically. So there are always people or cases where it's fallen through the cracks. I think we, at the tactical level, I think people can cope. But I do think that the whole point of why we still have over-the-counter, service staff and banking is because people want their choice of talking to somebody instead of dealing with a machine, right? Whereas I don't go to the counter much these days, right?
But that's the hardware of the nation then. It becomes, do we have enough space in our busy schedules to create that over-the-counter experience for people? The option is there.
But it's always got to be a multi-pronged approach, right? Because you have so many different segments in society. Now, I've come across many cases of like government service centers, like say CPF, where one of the biggest problems is they have a lot of senior citizens who want to go and have their statements printed at CPF office, at the building itself. But in order to get it printed, you need your SingPass. And lo and behold, I've forgotten my SingPass. So what did they do? They started a SingPass counter at CPF building, right? So you can help people reset their SingPass. So again, you've got to cater to the different segments of the market. And while banking and all that, they want to save money. They want to reduce the traffic at the bank branches. They want to go more digital rather than at the counter, right? For cost savings. There are just far too many segments in today's society that rely on the over-the-counter service as well. So your approach has always got to cater for all, with that literacy and that training, right, to move everyone to a more future-enabled kind of environment, which is digital.
And herein lies links back to the trust point, right? Governments have a far larger role and responsibility to discharge compared to private enterprises. And that's also the same reason why they need to consider the UI and the UX a lot more.
Yes.
Right? And be more inclusive, which isn't necessarily something that we were just having a conversation earlier, right, May-Ann? Like which OS to be optimal for the laptops that you're donated with, and private enterprises can just say, sorry, I don't support these machines from a particular year onwards with my OS, but the country cannot say that. Because I still got folks, citizens who have contributed to the pioneering of Merdeka generation where they're 90 and 100 years old now, and you can't expect them realistically to be tech savvy. Awesome if they are. They make Mothership or frontline mainstream news, but not going to be the case if they would just don't want to. So that herein is where the responsibility and trust is going to be.
Let me put a quote to you from James's essay. We should not distrust the chaos of the internet or seek to control it. It is intrinsically anarchic. What does that mean? What are you saying there? We just got to accept online chaos?
Why don't the others give their take about it first?
Should the digital world, the digital operating system, be anarchic and chaotic?
Well, it's always been self-organizing, so to speak. We are seeing a next development in the internet right now in terms of the structuring of it. Russia already has a new IP system being planned. We're seeing the splinternet actually happen. We're seeing the Chinese government, which has already had its Great Firewall of China for a very, very long time. We're seeing some of that same moves being taken by the US. So we don't know. I mean, indeed, it is anarchic in nature, but there is a great quotation, I think it's by Marx or something, that says capitalism within capitalism has its seeds of its own destruction within itself. I'm probably mangling the quote, but you understand the point. It has some of its own destruction within that sort of anarchy, because as a system of computers, it kind of has to have some sort of control mechanisms put in place. If not, you'll have these little islands. But I do have some very interesting discussions with other people who are technologists as well. They said, hey, why not an internet of connected islands? And that brings us back to your interconnected points, this idea of standards and making sure that, sure, I mean, if you want to have a little internet by yourself, you could have it, but as long as you can talk to me, maybe emails can get through.
Gateways of interoperability, right? Or I think James also brought up in his essay APIs, right? Just
green lanes,
define ways of different islands communicating with each other, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Different protocols.
Yeah, so my take is that, I mean, we live in societies and countries with national laws, cultural habits, and societal norms. On the internet, these constraints are completely reshaped, right? As what May-Ann was saying. In many cases, the fact that you're Donald Trump or Xi Jinping doesn't matter one bit, pun intended, right? And as you disappear and blend into this voices of humans behind computers or AI behind server code, right? And you can adopt as many personas as you want. This is the part where, back to your islands or otherwise, right, where anarchic within itself containing the seeds of destruction. I think I treat the internet as a commons, right? And just like the air we breathe right now. And however, unlike China, Russia, and the US, Singapore is not in a position to be a price maker. Right? The internet does not become any less meaningful for us if China or the US chooses to block each other's companies, right? Or see, it doesn't matter to me if Russia has a different IP system as long as we can connect to it, right? And herein lies the network effect that the internet is. As long as the rest of us get to continue to connect and transact and interact with them. I believe, and going on another dimension, even if there are different blocking mechanisms or control mechanisms put in place over what I think should inherently be a free and democratic internet to allow all possible multitudes to exist, there will be competing enterprises who will form to provide their version of the internet. As embodied by Elon and the satellites he's launching into space to form his own internet ISP. Right,
or the Loon project, right?
Or the Project Loon. So I think we'll see all this play out. It's this amazing game of life that will just seed and germinate. And as users of this internet, I'm happy to just keep watching this and watch.
Sounds like you've got another Birthday Collective essay in you, maybe for one of the future books. You've all had your homework. You've got to tell me 3 words to describe the future yet to be invented. May-Ann.
So I have 3 words. I think the future is going to be contradictory. I think that there is going to be extreme inequity and inequality.
Oh, gosh. James, what are your 3 words?
I'm a lifelong Star Trek fan, and I'm pretty optimistic. So it's going to be abundance, equality, and frontiers.
Wun, what are your 3 words?
Literacy, interoperability, well, that's 2 words, right? And ecosystem.
Okay, that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much for listening. I'm going to give you 3 words instead. I'm going to say optimistic, passionate, and I guess secure. How's that sound?
SG Secure.
SG Secure. Very nice. Thank you very much. That's all we've got time for today. We've had loads of different essays from the different birthday books that are available. They're like Pokemon. Can you collect them all? That's what you need to do. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you for listening to Collectively Speaking by the Birthday Collective. We aim to be a brain, heart, and hand trust for Singapore, focusing on the gifts we can offer to future generations. To find out more, visit our website at thebirthdaycollective.com and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at The Birthday Collective. If you enjoyed this episode, do subscribe and drop us a review.